Okay, George.
Here you come.
Here you come. Happy birthday. Again. Again and again and again. It's fabulous. There you are.
Is that the original?
No, there was only one. There's only one you,
I see.
and there's only one of these.
Yeah. It's so nice that you do this.
You're most welcome. It is my pleasure.
Sharon is a wonderful artist. I was born in a little village in Germany on what's called the Eastern Sea. My grandparents had a farm there, and until I was 3 years old I was there, and then my parents moved to Berlin. And in Berlin I was raised, I got my education there on a gymnasium, and then I studied at the Technical University in Berlin, and I got degrees in mechanical and electrical engineering.
Uh-huh. And why are you no longer in Berlin?
Pardon?
Why did you leave Berlin?
Why did we leave Berlin? We had a very good reason. We married in 1939, and at that time the Nazis arrested Jewish men, and that is really my reason why I left. I had a very good position as the assistant to the president of a manufacturer of electronic equipment, and they told me I wouldn't have to worry about anything happening to me because they would protect me, but I didn't take that. I made arrangements to leave the country with my new wife, and we decided to come to this country, to the USA. We could not get our visa immediately, so I had a sister who had already left Germany and gone to England, and she made it possible for us to come to England and wait there for a year for our visa to the United States.
Go ahead.
Let me backtrack a little from what you have just told us. You once mentioned to us that on your honeymoon you went to Austria and were arrested. And that, of course, was a tragedy. But how was it that your wife could get you out of jail?
Well, of course, there was a terrible shock to us too. In the middle of the night, a policeman knocked at the door and asked me if I'm Jewish and says, you have to come with me and I have to arrest you. At any rate, how did my wife get me out? I wasn't there when she spoke to the Nazis in Austria, but apparently, you know, the Austrians are sensitive people. They have a little understanding for what human beings need, and they let me go. She did it. I wasn't there when she just came to me to the prison and said, come.
May I add a footnote to that? Mom told me that when she was waiting for you while you were in jail, she was staying at a rooming house. And the woman who ran that rooming house said to her, very much along the lines of what you have just said, the jailer is a very sentimental man, and you're a beautiful young woman, and if you now go to the jail and plead that this is your honeymoon, and what's more, tell them that you have made plans to leave the country, that it's just a question of time, that they will let you go.
That's your answer.
Yes.
I would like to tell a slightly different story.
This is how stories go in
It
families.
It was October of 1938 when Mom and Dad were married. On October 30th, 1938. And they went to Austria on their honeymoon. And that happens to be the time that coincided with Kristallnacht, which was the night that the Nazis broke into Jewish homes, and it's called the Night of the Broken Glass, and smashed all their crystals and fine china and paintings and furniture because the Germans felt it was not honest to steal or plunder, but destroying was a different matter because this was the property of the Jews. Anyway, that's what happened while my parents were on their honeymoon. Yes, Dad received a knock. They were in a small mountain village in Austria. There was a knock on the door in the middle of the night, come with me. If I say anything incorrectly, you correct me, Dad.
Yeah.
And Dad was asked by two plainclothesmen to come with them, and he suddenly sort of woke up and thought, what am I doing? And these strangers are asking me to go off with them in the middle of the night. And he started to resist them. He said that there was a bar where people were drinking, and they came out and helped these plainclothesmen. Anyway, he got put into this small mountain-top, small village jail, and Dad was 32 years old, Mom was 19. There was 13 years difference between them. My mother actually, she left Austria and drove back to Germany. She didn't know what to do. Her husband was in prison, and she was, what do I do now? She went home, and it was her grandmother who said to her, the Austrians are very romantic people. Take this natural Valium, which is valerian, go back to Austria, and just keep saying over and over again to anybody who will listen, we were on our honeymoon, and they'll let your husband go. Which in fact is what happened. Would you like to hear the story of how Marianne negotiated this?
Mm-hmm. Of course.
When Dad was in this small hillside prison, he had a copper penny in his pocket, which do you remember this, Dad? You had a penny in your pocket, a copper penny, and you screwed it into the the light fixtures. You want to tell this part?
Well, first of all, the administrator of this little office, little prison, the prison was several hundred years old and was in terrible condition. At any rate, the administrator was given the job of being administrator there because he was an anti-Nazi, and they put him away in that place. And we became very, very friendly. He was very, very helpful and helped me communicate with my wife. They even invited me to meals. So I was very, very lucky there.
And did you intentionally blow out the electricity with the penny? Is that?
Yes.
Was
I-
that the
question?
Well, I'm trying to.
I did that. I don't exactly remember anymore why I did it, but I think one of the reasons was that I was in a small room in that village together with some other guy. I didn't like that. I wanted my own cell, and so I got some attention that way.
And it's a good thing you were an electrical engineer.
Dad told me this story quite a number of years ago. He put the penny into the light socket, blew all the circuits, and they were beside themselves. They kept trying to fix it, probably with fuses, and it kept blowing. And they knew that he was an engineer. So they went to him and said, "Can you help us?" And he said, "Well, I'll think about it." And eventually he fixed it.
Yes.
And they were so beholding and grateful that he had done this that they were a lot kinder to him.
Wonderful story.
And the rest of it was, Dad was then moved. This whole thing, I think, took place over about 6 weeks.
Ah.
And Dad was moved down into Salzburg, out of this little mountain village, into a larger prison and in a cell with a lot of really derelict sort of folks. Do you remember the story of Mom coming to the prison in Salzburg, or would you like me to?
I remember how she came when she picked me up, but if you have details.
I do, and I would like to tell the details,
Yeah.
and then you can tell the rest of it. Mom drove all the way back to Germany, to Würzburg, all the way back to Salzburg. I have a photograph of my mother. This is when they were still on their honeymoon and Dad was not in prison, and he had taken a photograph of my mother from behind on a cliff looking out over Salzburg, and on either side of her are 2 SS officers with their jodhpurs and their beautiful hats, and one of them's checking her out.
Ooh. Oh,
And it's a very eerie photo.
Yeah.
Anyway, so shortly thereafter, Dad was arrested and put into these various prisons. The story that Mom told me was that she came back to Salzburg to try and get you out of prison. And she went to the warden and said, we were on our honeymoon, would you consider letting my husband go? We will get out of the country immediately. And he said, come back tomorrow and I'll let you know. And she said, the first time I walked in there and these iron gates closed behind me, I didn't know if I would ever come out again. This is how brave she was, and this is how much she loved Dad. She did come back the next day, and he said, I've thought about it, and yes, you can have your husband back. At which point she said, maybe this was the night before, she said, can you recommend a hotel?
Oh my God.
And he said, Jews aren't allowed in any hotels. But I know that there is one Jewish family left in Salzburg. Here's the address. Go and knock on their door and see if they will let you stay with them. And in fact, they took her in. They gave her a chair in their living room. And it turns out that this house had been divided. The family was allowed to live in half of the house, and it was a Nazi headquarters in the other half of the house. And my mother sat in this chair all night long watching SS officers walk back and forth up and down the hallway. And the next day she went and got Dad.
Wow.
Let's move on a little
Yes.
with your life, George, and tell us what you did when you first got to New York. And you arrived, as I understand, pennilessly, mostly because you left that penny in Austria, I think.
Well, we came had left London on a small cruiser, and we left just in time because the Nazis had started throwing bombs down on London. And one of the bombs exploded about 200 feet away from our boat, but nothing happened to it. So we left the next day, and the cruise took 8 days instead of the usual 3 days, because the German U-boats had to be noted and avoided, and it took very, very long. So we finally came to New York Harbor, and we were delighted when we saw all the lights, because London was in a blackout when we left. So we had $30 between us, and we were so delighted to be in America that we went into the ship's bar, and when we came up, we had only $15 left. Then a man came up to me and said, "Do you have $1? I can take you to a shelter." And I gave him the $1, and he put us in a taxi, and we were put up in a Jewish refugee shelter in downtown New York. And the shelter, the room that we had was about 8 foot by 8 foot. It was really only a cage, another room. At any rate, the shelter had some kind of an employment service. And one day they called for workers at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And I figured that would be something technical, so I raised my hand, and they sent me the next day to the Navy Yard, and I was dressed in a business suit, and I was carrying some paper map. And they said when I come to the Navy Yard, I should look for a guy. They gave me his name, I think it was Henry. And I came to the Navy Yard, and there was nobody there. So I finally saw in the very, very end of the room, I saw a ladder with a guy on top of it, and I went to him, and I said, "Are you Henry?" He said, "Yeah, what do you want?"
Excuse me, George, could you speak English well then?
Oh, could I speak English well?
Yes,
Yes,
because you
of
had
course.
just come from
Well,
Germany.
we had lived in England before
He lived
for a
in
year and
England
a half.
for a year and a half.
Oh,
So
that helped.
we were fluent in English.
okay.
Excellent.
So the guy said, "What do you want?" I said, "I have a job here. I'm supposed to do some work." So he said, "Yeah, come back tomorrow, but dress decently." So you will have to carry cement bags and big wooden beams. We are restoring this Navy Yard here. So I did that, and they hired me for 40 cents an hour. But I was so good at doing my work, they paid me 45. And of course we were delighted because it brought us at least a little money. So that I did for a few months, and then the boss came to me and said, "George, you're laid off." And I was delighted because I thought being laid off means a promotion. So I went home and I said to Marianne, "I have good news, I'm laid off."
Did she know what the expression meant?
I don't remember, but we eventually found out
Yes.
what it meant.
Oh, my.
So then I was able to find a job as a machine operator. And I worked there for a while, and then they made me foreman. And I was very happy about it because I now had a decent position, and I had an income that gave us enough to live on. So we had moved to a room, rented a room in
The Upper West Side?
on the Upper West Side. Unfortunately, the room had a slanted floor. It was not very comfortable, and also was full of bed bugs. But eventually we find something better. There was a fraternity brother in New York, and the mother rented out her house to refugees.
What did Marianne do during this time?
Good question.
Marianne had gotten a job in a watch factory, and she assembled watches.
She told me she painted the dials,
Oh yes, yes, yes.
Meticulous work.
which was a precursor to her
To her.
career as a
Yes.
textile designer.
Uh-huh.
So eventually you were recognized or were able to use your engineering and electrical skills. And you must have gone to a firm that was able to use your abilities.
Yeah. Before that, I was working for a small company. Yes, also a technical job, and I made an invention there. And they paid me, I think, a nickel for each item that used my invention. And fortunately, enough money from these royalties came in that made it possible for me to buy our own home in Queens Village. I think I bought a very nice little house for $13,000.
That was a lot of nickels.
It was a lot of nickels. And they bought it almost sight unseen. My mother told me that they went to see it at night, very briefly, sold.
It was a great decision because it turned out to be one of the best neighborhoods on Long Island, in Queens.
Oh, that was
And, yeah, beautiful home.
Now, you were not yet born, either one of you.
Correct, but we grew up in that house.
No, I was born. I was born in 1944.
So,
And we
Cal
lived
was born
Karen.
in New York.
and I think they bought this house in 46, Dad? Was it 1946? That you bought the house?
doesn't matter.
It's possible, I don't remember.
And then I was born.
Would you like to know what the invention was that Dad
Yes.
made?
Yes.
Okay. Dad, you want to tell them what the invention was?
It was a special hinge that permitted plastic cases to be closed. These people were manufacturing plastic containers.
And the beauty of the hinge, excuse me for interrupting, was that
Pardon?
it was not made out of metal.
No,
And
that
metal
The
No,
hinge
the
itself.
hinge itself was metal.
Oh, okay.
No,
I understand at that time you also, at about that time, you also invented something that was useful to the United States Navy.
Well, I eventually became, that was my last job, it lasted quite a while. I became chief engineer for Wechsler Instruments in Freeport, Long Island. And you are right, under the instruments that we developed under my guidance became standard for the American Navy. The instruments were designed to measure such things as temperature and pressure, and they had to be what's called shock resistant. And the reason for that, the German U-boats exploded torpedoes near the American cruisers, and that shook up the cruisers terribly, and the instruments had to stay
Functional.
in working condition.
You must have been very clever.
Very what?
Clever, smart,
He still is.
and still
Thank-
is, exactly.
Thank you.
Now, when we get into your later life, I will tell a couple of things I remember that showed in late age how clever you were. But then, eventually, you must have retired.
I retired from the job at Wechsler, at the instrument company, and I became a consultant. And I had clients in various parts of the country, had a very good relationship for them, and that brought me a good income.
And then you, for what reason did you decide to leave New York and come to this wonderful state of Vermont?
Yeah, I had, I think I mentioned it before, I had good friends here. And we were visiting and we liked it and we decided to move. So what we did before we finally settled here, we had a vacation house in Athens.
In Athens.
Yeah, and it was very, very charming and very, very nice. We lived there, and I even had my clients come to visit.
But I remember when I first met you, you were living in Westminster West.
Yes. From when we finally decided to live here permanently, I mean, the house in Athens was only a vacation house. So when we decided to live here permanently, we looked for a place and we found this place in Westminster West. It was a wonderful house with 11 acres of land, and it was the gift of, it had 4,000 square feet, and it had been given from a teacher to his wife, and it was in terrible shape when he gave it to her. She called it something about, I don't know.
Simon's Revenge.
Huh?
I remembered.
Simon's Revenge.
Exactly. She called it Simon's Revenge.
Yes.
So we were still living in New York, but I spent a lot of time. I had a local The fellow put the place in fine shape. Every room was renewed and rebuilt, and I put in a 75-foot swimming pool, and then we finally moved in and lived there very, very happily for many years. We had our children and grandchildren visit.
When we, just a minute, I want to say, when we built our house, that was in 1995, your wife said, Carol, I know you love plants and flowers. Come out and I will give you things for your new garden. So I did that. And one of her great things she showed me, she was so proud, she said, and look at my swimming pool. Do you know what George did? He figured out how to heat that pool with solar energy.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Right.
Yes, with hoses going back and forth next to the pool.
And she was so happy with that. And the flowers, I still have many of them. They're very wonderful.
I remember your living room had a balcony inside the house.
Yes,
It had both a balcony inside and outside.
yes, true, yes.
Now, did both of your daughters live there for a while also?
We never lived there, but I have two daughters of my own, and my husband and my daughters would come up to this house maybe 6, 7, 8 times a year, kit and caboodle, and it was a paradise.
Wow.
It was the pool and the gardens were the heart and soul of it, but then there was also a pond and little areas sort of tucked away. The landscaping was this extraordinary labor of love. In fact, I think the defining factor for one of my ideas about what creates a good marriage was watching my parents do this labor of love together.
Mm. It was evident.
And my garden is also filled with flowers from
Yes.
my mother's
Yes.
garden, and I know my sister's is as well.
Yes. Mm. And then you, as I recall, it became too much to manage, and you bought a condominium. Is that
Yes,
right?
yes.
And there,
Arbor Hill.
Arbor Hill, yes. And there, the enormous pride of Marianne was that you, imagine, you designed a stair, a sit-on with an elevator that could go up the stairs.
A chair
A
stair.
chair stair. Ah,
Because to buy one out of the box was too expensive and not nearly as much fun.
as using your brain, which was still...
Coming back to the place in Westminster West,
Yes.
there was a music organization. What
The
is
Yellow Barn.
it? The Yellow Barn
Yes.
had annual events and celebration, and people came from all over and enjoyed it.
Yes.
In fact, it was your wife, Marianne, who started a wonderful event that continues to this day to raise money for the Yellow Barn, and that is to have an annual garden tour. And that, I think, was your wife's idea.
Yeah, yeah.
And not only was it a garden tour, but we had to cook food and make up elegant lunches so that people could go and see these gardens in style. That was Marianne, too.
Yeah.
Well, George, and now you are a young man still. But this wonderful piece that shows your head, and I think it's a very good thing. One always can use an extra head, but I doubt if it has quite the brains that are in that head. And so now you are, this was given to you when you were 100, is that, or done when you were 100, is that right? To celebrate your 100th birthday?
Around then, yes.
Okay. And now you are
106.
106.
What is the secret of your success? How do you manage to be able to continue year after year?
People ask me that very often. The answer to is I have no idea.
It isn't, some people
If
say,
I knew it, I would write a book
Yes,
and I would become a multimillionaire.
that's right. That's right.
some people say it's because they drink a bottle of whiskey every day, but that's not your secret.
I have never been drinking a lot, except when I was very young man and we had these drinking parties at the fraternity.
Uh-huh. Yes.
I have heard my father answer that question a little bit differently.
And one thing I never did was smoking.
Ah,
Okay, very important.
yes.
I have heard you answer that question about your longevity differently,
Yeah.
and I don't know if you were serious, but what you said was avoid stress.
Well, that's probably correct.
I would say part of it was one of the expressions I like is use it or lose it. And you have always used it and not lost it. And I remember seeing too that you love sport and activity.
By the way, I was really moving around. I played tennis, I played golf, I was in sports organizations. At one time, I was an instructor at the college for tennis.
Was
I
that
understand also that you were a champion runner.
Yes, I won a few prizes.
And since this is Vermont, we must also mention that you were a skier.
Oh, yes. When we lived in New York, we came to Vermont every weekend to ski.
One of the activities that nobody's mentioned is the Wyndham Art Gallery,
Oh, that's important.
which at the young age of a mere 84, Mom and Dad were talking one day about the contemporary art scene here in Brattleboro and the fact that there are so many artists. And do you want to talk about what you decided to do?
Yeah, in 1986, I decided to start a gallery for local artists because it was really needed. At that time, I was the president of the Wyndham Art Gallery, of the Wyndham Art
Council.
Council. And I looked around on Main Street and I happened to know Sam, the owner of Sam's, and no, wait a minute, it wasn't, it was the owner of the hotel,
The latches?
the Latches
Mr.
Hotel.
Spiro?
What was his
Mr.
name?
Spiro? Isn't that the
Spiro,
owner?
yes,
Spiro,
yes. And he gave me a small room free of charge, and I told several artists about it, and they were delighted, and they brought their paintings and they hung them. And a week after the gallery was opened, one painting sold for $3,000,
Whoa.
and there was great delight.
Yes.
So then one of the artists found a bigger room, a bigger, several rooms opposite of Sam's store on Main Street. And we opened that, we had meetings there, and we had very nice entertainments. And that gallery lasted 20 years.
Amazing.
And then it finally closed down because of the financial problems that developed here.
Many people, we included, made a point of always going when we knew there was an opening, because we wanted to see what was being shown, and they were wonderful things. And people always spoke of you. I mean, it was not just a hidden issue. They were very appreciative, the artists.
And I believe you were honored by the Vermont Arts Council for having done that.
Yes, they gave me a
Plaque.
a plaque, yeah. By the way, I on my last birthday, I got letters of congratulation from 3 important people. The 2 senators, Leahy,
Leahy.
yeah,
Yes.
was one of them. He was a senator, and Bernie Sanders, and believe it or not, the President of the United States
Oh.
and his wife
Mm.
signed a letter
Oh,
congratulating me, and they knew about my contribution to the art.
that's good.
That's wonderful.
I have always thought it lucky that you were born on February 28th, not 29th.
Yes.
You would not have attained this age.
I think that's my story.
Well, I just want to say one other little thing, and that is Carol and I helped found the Windmill Hill Pinnacle Association, which has a number of mountaintops here in Windham County that have beautiful views. And it has been an absolute delight that you have been able to come up once a year and help us enjoy those views.
Yeah.
It's on
But
accessibility day.
I tell you, I went up earlier this year, as you may know, but I have a problem with my neck, and the road going up there
It's rough.
is terrible,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
I was so shaken up, so I can't do it anymore.
Could you wear a brace, perhaps?
Or we
No,
could-
Something?
no.
Or
I'm-
we'll smooth out the
I'm-
road.
We will try to repair the road.
Yes.
Okay.